Today, I'd like to tell you a story about resiliency and leadership. You know, leaders and the balance between looking at the well-being of employees that are in their charge and the arm's length relationship of the employer-employee dynamic and what HR goes and says should be done in terms of what a leader can do, should do to be able to go and support employees. It's really an ever-changing dynamic right now, and I think more towards the good. Historically here, HR and this whole dynamic of connecting with employees has been on the risk management and legal side of things. Whereas on a daily basis, we're with this team that we lead for 8 hours a day or more. A third of our lives is spent interacting with one another. And it is inevitable that the work and the home personal life mix and mingle. And what happens in other parts of the personal life will show itself in the workplace. And I'd like to tell you a story about one of the players that I coached in basketball that is completely and totally translatable to adults in terms of the process of how I looked at being able to go and support this player to be able to go and help him not become just a greater contributor to the team, but allowed him to be able to progress from the different dynamic that he was in into something that was much more positive. Now, I had coached this young man in 7th grade and 8th grade. So he was 12, 13, 14 years old. Great kid, had some anger issues with authority, had a problem with getting technical fouls. Fun-loving, liked to bounce around, smiled a lot, but when competition got going and he felt that he was wronged, he let loose a little bit too much. It was something that I had to try and manage. And it was interesting, as we got about 2/3 of the way through our schedule, there was a tournament that we were in where he ended up getting a technical foul for some bad stuff he was doing with an opponent. He came to the bench, was really distraught and crying. I kept him out for the rest of the game because he really wasn't quite ready to play. We had a quick conversation, talked with the team about mental control. This player texted me that night, it was Saturday night, apologizing for his behavior, wouldn't do it again. He was really starting to understand what was going on. The real problem came the next day, where he got another technical foul. And in fact, I had some parents come to me from the opposing team talking about things that he was doing to their parents. Needless to say, as a coach, I was livid. This type of behavior in the workplace, if you look at the basketball court as the workplace, really is quite unacceptable. You can't go and have those types of outbursts at coworkers, at authority, at anybody. You need to be able to go and treat people with the type of respect that they require and deserve. So I was thinking about punishment because, this type of behavior has to have ramifications, right? But as I thought about it, punishment wasn't going to do any good. There was a possibility that I could have a positive impact on this young man by trying to understand what was going on that led him to these types of outbursts. Very similar to the types of outbursts that I had in 2010 and 2011 as I was at the lowest parts of my depression. As a coach, I would blurt out at the players at home. I would blurt out at my wife and my 2 sons, and they were walking on eggshells. So I knew what it was like to not be able to control emotions and have significant impacts on others. So we had practice the next night on Monday, and I decided I was going to communicate with this player's parents and say, hey, I'd love to have a conversation about resiliency, about where he's at. Maybe there's something going on in his world that we can look at and see if we can head things off before they become a problem. So I took this young man aside during practice and had a conversation, asking him if there was anything going on in his world that was really stressful for him, that was tough for him to deal with. And he told me about an older brother that had rage issues, and he felt really stressed by having to be the perfect son, the perfect brother, the one that always had to keep the good face because the house was so tense because of what was going on with his older brother. I shared with him my experiences with bursting out and the impact it had on others, and my journey as I started understanding the four forces of leadership and respecting what was going on, about resiliency, about the aspect of rubber bands being stretched to the point where, as we all know, you stretch it too much, those rubber bands will break. And that's similar to resiliency. When we have all this weight and all this pulling on all the aspects of our lives, we only have so much stretching that we can do, right? And I talked about ways that you can either build up rubber bands, add some more to be able to build more strength to handle the weight that you have upon your shoulders, the pulling at you, if you're able to go and bring that on. Or talking about taking some stress out, removing oneself from the stressful situations so it doesn't weigh you down and possibly break those rubber bands. And I also talked about building new techniques to be able to, one, understand when the stress is getting hard, when you're in situations where stress is added, and build structures where you can head off the stress before it gets too high. And I gave this player a rubber band, not to necessarily put on his wrist and as some of the psychological things you go and snap it when you feel like something's going wrong. I didn't suggest that, but it was just a symbol of the flexibility and the resiliency that we all have to be able to go and manage the stress of our world, our work, our family, our friendships, our finances. All of those things happen to us each and every day. In how we go and add rubber bands and weave together rubber bands for a nice, strong base that can stretch as well as hold a lot of weight is really important. I coached this player the next year, and he was a completely different individual. That same type of bounce that he had and the smile was even more pronounced. And his outbursts were essentially eliminated. In fact, I saw him just a couple of weeks ago, and the smile on his face when he saw me and said, "Coach!" And we gave each other a nice big hug, knowing that he was doing really well, happy with himself and the way his life was so encouraging to me as a leader. The way this translates into your world is that there are people in your charge that are having their rubber bands stretched and loaded all the time. Things that you want them to do, things that their family wants them to do, their personal finances. Maybe they had a death in the family. Something's going on. And if they happen to be behaving in situations, especially stressful situations, that are out of character, you can actually be a supportive force in helping them identify what's going on and do what I call name it and tame it. People get so caught up in all this stress and just managing it that they have the blinders on and they don't happen to go and understand even what's going on because they're just trying to keep their head above water. And you as a leader, if you can go and help them recognize what's going on, the implications of the acts that they have, and help them name what's going on, to intellectualize and visualize what's happening. Now that they can name that, they can start addressing it and taming it. Some chicken soup for the soul. The way that you can lead and help those people that are in distress. The results, increase performance from them as well as the people around them that don't have to deal with the outburst as much. And an individual that is connected much more tightly to you because you've cared. You looked at them as an individual and looked to help them. So when you need them, they will be first in line to be able to go and handle things in that stressful situation. They'll be able to go and perform in the less stressful situations at a higher rate. And when the stressful situations come, they're going to be clearer and more lucid so they can go and do the things that need to be done when it really counts. So think about how you go and work with employees when you see some different behaviors that might be out of the norm, that you might be able to do some things to be able to go and help them out, to help the team out. Send me a note, give me a call. I'd love to chat with you about how you go and lead in stressful situations, how you even go and look to go and manage your own resiliency. Because if you have difficulties being resilient, employees will see that. They'll pull back a little bit. And your ability to lead will be shown and codified during those stressful situations. They'll see how you perform under stress, and they will follow in those instances what happens with their leader.